Sports View London boxing news from the capital city with Matchroom promoter Eddie Hearn. Just had the press conference there announcing the January 31st fights. Eddie, if you would, could you run us through the bill and your opinions of the fights, please?
Sure. So you got young Charlie Edwards, we just signed, the 8th member of the GB podium squad to join Matchroom Sports, turning pro on the card, as is Isaac Chamberlain, very exciting young cruiserweight as well. You got Ben Hall fighting Ryan Toms. Ben's a young light middleweight coming through at the moment. Then you got a couple of really good little classic sort of mini domestic derbies, if you like, between John Wayne Hibbert and Tyler Goodjohn, and Ricky Boylan and Tommy Martin. If you don't follow those four on Twitter, do it, because there's going to be plenty of beef going on until January 31st. Yeah, and really good 50-50 fights. You know, I mean, all four of those kids want to go on to fight for the British titles, and I believe most of them will. But these are quite career-defining fights at this stage, especially for Tommy Martin. He's 21 or something like that, you know. And Boylan can't afford to lose after losing to Tyler Goodjohn. So two really good fights there. Kevin Mitchell fighting Daniel Estrada. It's a great fight for the WBC silver title. I think will turn into a final eliminator for the world title, for the fight, the winner of Linares against Pareto. Saw Estrada recently on the Brook Porter card when he fought Figueroa, gave him a great fight. And John Ryder, we're in talks with Sebastian Highland, Jorge Sebastian Highland, who's just stopped Matthew Macklin.
How close are you?
We're close. I mean, you know, I think other people might have announced it today, but I don't like to do it till the ink's dry. And you know, I think anything can happen. It's not done. I think there's interest in the fight, but ultimately, until it's done, we won't announce it. But John's looking for all those big fights. You know, him and Tony Sims now are saying we'll fight anyone. You know, and it's great to be a part of that process, because you're only limited by your imagination.
No doubt it's a promoter's dream when you've got the likes of Tony Sims saying, I want him let off the leash.
Exactly. You know, and we had that against Kamitsky, you know, who pulled out. We ended up fighting Tete, okay, but he wants that test. You know, he's been sparring with Andy Lee in his camp. He's, you know, looking great in sparring, and he's ready for the big fight. So, you know, literally anyone in the world rankings, they'll be up for fighting right now.
I spoke to John at length earlier, and he says he almost feels like the forgotten man.
Yeah.
Because people forget he ran Billy Jones.
Well, many thought, you know, I felt he could have nicked that fight.
Many did.
Yeah. And you know, I believe he's as good as, and now better than Billy Joe Saunders and better than Chris Eubank Jr. But until he has that breakout fight, it's not going to happen. So that's why he's so desperate for that fight. And Highland would be absolutely perfect. Very tough fight. I mean, like,
definitely.
I would say Ryder's the underdog going into that fight. But he's up for it, and you know, if you lose in a fight like that, you can always come back and fight Billy Joe. And if you win, all of a sudden you're right there. You know, and I think styles make fights, and him versus Highland, stylistically, is a great fight.
Kevin Kingpin Johnson's words today on the head table. You didn't look shocked. You've heard similar outbursts before. What would you say to something like that?
This is one of the reasons I wanted to make the fight, because it tests Anthony, not just physically, but mentally and verbally, and he hasn't had that before. So there's a couple of times, he's a bit, thinking, what's going on here? But it's great, it sells the fight. People at home will look at it and say, wow, Kevin Johnson, he's up for it, and he is. He's got 10 weeks to prepare. It's not 2 weeks like he said. It's a valid point. So he'll be giving it a go. And people say, oh, sometimes Johnson doesn't come to win. He can't box on the back foot against Joshua. He's going to be a punch bag with Joshua's speed and power. So I believe he'll fight differently. I think he'll be trying to counter him, be trying to knock him out. So it's a real big test. After 10 fights, you know, no one would have thought that Joshua, after 10 fights, would be in headline at the O2 against Kevin Johnson. So his progression's been fantastic, and it's the perfect fight for him.
Most definitely. And I basically interviewed Kevin Johnson and Dylan White together, and both were looking into each other's eyes. They're both in the same camp, the same gym. They're going to be sparring together. And they're very confident that they know the way to beat Anthony Joshua, and they're bringing up the amateur days of it.
Yeah, of course.
So,
but you know, when Dylan White fought Anthony Joshua, I think Anthony was like a 2 or 3 fight novice. He was all over the place. I mean, there's footage of it on the internet. So he's a different animal now. But yeah, they'll definitely be coming up for a strategy, and there'll be a hell of a lot of people that will want to see Kevin Johnson beat Anthony Joshua. Hell of a lot of people in the game. You know what I mean? I'm not talking about the man on the street.
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
So people will be trying to help him, but I ain't gonna help him, because Joshua's a different animal. You know, he's not your average heavyweight prospect. He's getting better and better, and you know, this is a tough fight for him, but I think he'll shine.
The general consensus is obviously Kevin Johnson, he fights one way. He likes to roll and tuck up and try and take shots on the elbows and outside of the glove. But it's one thing doing that against a less powerful opponent. But with Anthony Joshua, full pelt, hungry, young,
speed as well. Speed kills, and and that's what I'm talking about people like Tyson Fury and those kind of fights. That's why I fancy him to beat them kind of people, because when you're under pressure and you're getting hit powerfully with speed, it's a different ball game. I know you can counter, but you've got to look to counter. You've got to throw a shot, and you've got to not worry about taking one back. And that's why I'm saying Johnson can't fight like that against Joshua. He can't just look to rock, because he's just going to get. There's going to be 30, 40 shots raining in on him. It's not going to be like, oh, rolled 2, or that's a result. It's going to be bom, 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 coming everywhere. So, the main, I would say the best chance that Johnson's got is to take him rounds, and let Joshua get sloppy, let him get disheartened and bored, and then, look to stop him.
Regarding the weekend's action, Tyson Fury and Derek Chisora, what's your outtake on that fight, Eddie, please?
It was a terrible fight, obviously, and you can't control what happens when you make a fight. Obviously, we had Cleverly against Bell. He weren't the greatest fight in the world. Everyone expected it to be a great fight. The difference is, I don't think many thought Fury Chisora was going to be a great fight. They did it before. It wasn't a great fight, but they did it again, and it was 10 times worse. And of course, it was on at silly o'clock. So by then, everyone was bored and wanted to get home, and then the booze started, and But you can't control whether a fight's good or not. You can only make a fight, in your opinion, that's good. Chisora looked very one-paced, didn't really look interested. Fury did what he had to do. He's a talent, and he's a size. That's the difference. And he's a good fighter. He's definitely a good fighter, but he's clever. In and out of the ring, and he knows what works. And he knows that him against Joshua is too big to miss.
Stripping away the politics of boxing, if you will, if the opportunity presented itself, would you have no hesitation in putting Anthony Joshua in with the likes of Derek Chisora or Tyson Fury tomorrow?
Sure, yeah. I mean, look, people say to me, "Oh, you don't let your fighters fight on Box Nation." No, but they don't want to box on Box Nation. They want to box on Sky Sports. They want to be pay-per-view fighters. Very straightforward. Anthony Joshua's future is to be a box office fighter for the next 3, 4, 5 years. So what sense would it be for him to move off the channel that's built him to this position to box on a channel with, I don't know, 1/10 of the audience or 100th of the level of promotion? So it's not really about politics, it's just about making the right decisions for my fighters. If I turn around to Anthony Joshua and went, okay, you're now going to fight Derek Chisora on Box Nation, he'd think I was absolutely off my rocker. And he'd say no. He says, I'm on Sky and I want to build into a box office fighter. So it's not really necessary about the politics. Fury, I don't know his contractual situation. Obviously he's with Hennessy and Box Nation and Peter Fury, so maybe he's able to box on Sky Box Office. But it's not as big a fight now as it could be in 6 months and maybe in 12 months.
Right.
But it's inevitable at some point.
Most definitely. And just to run through the Carl Froch, Chavez Jr. situation, where do we stand on that?
Everybody wants the fight. It's progressing. Things will come to a head, I believe, in the next couple of weeks, and I'm hopeful that it'll get made for the end of March.
From a promoter's side of view, has it been hard work getting to where you've got to now?
Yeah, but it's nothing new. There's always problems and contractual problems and egos, and but when a fighter wants it, an advisor wants it, a promoter wants it, the networks want it, generally it happens, and we hope that's the case.
Finally, Kell Brook, still going great ones, on course for his comeback.
Yeah, he's just had a couple of weeks in Spain. He's back in training, looking at March the 7th. Obviously, all eyes on Vegas next week with Khan. We want to make that fight for May or June of next year. Kell will box on March the 7th in Sheffield. And then, if Khan doesn't get Mayweather, I think that fight's inevitable. But I don't believe he'll get Mayweather, and I think he'll end up fighting Khan next year, Brook next year.
You have that in mind as a stadium fight?
Absolutely.
Have you care to share your venues? Would it be as big as Wembley?
Yeah, we've got Wembley, Old Trafford. I think a lot depends on the other fights as well. So definitely a stadium filler and a massive fight.
Eddie Hearn, thank you for your time.
Thanks, mate.